This channel is supported by TrueFire. TrueFire is an online library of lessons from some of my favourite players. There's thousands of lessons on there. You can use the promo code JNC40 to get 40% off of any of their courses. I wanted to do a video today answering a question that I got from Joel, or signs off his email Joe, but Joel is in the name, so I'm going to go with Joe as you signed off the email, who asked me, I thought, quite a good question. First of all, we started off with some compliments, which we don't need to do that. Then he says, I picked up a guitar during COVID after not having touched one in 25 years. As one does, I jumped in headfirst and bought a Les Paul and a Marshall Origin 20 head with a 2x12 cab and a bunch of pedals. The intent was always for home use, so a bit overkill. I have slowly gone digital and now play a Boss GX100 through some IK multimedia micro loud monitors. Release of the Fender TMP Master Pro has me curious, what would John do? Having played both, would you upgrade from the Boss to the Fender? Would love your thoughts. Also, do you think playing through something other than the iLoud monitors would be an upgrade at all? Does not need to be loud, just clear, spacious, that kind of thing. Any thoughts, advice would be greatly appreciated. So thank you for the email, Joe. I do on this channel try to hopefully sort of answer questions that you might have. That's kind of generally what the idea is, like the thrust of what real people might be interested in. So the Boss GX100, I've actually got a video that I'm planning to do on a different Boss device. I think probably sounds about as good as the Fender TMP Master Pro, to be honest with you. These have 32, a lot of the other Boss GT stuff has like kind of the industry leading chipsets and stuff like that. Now, in terms of answering this question, I wanted to sort of think about a few different things. I want to think about price, because assuming that it's for home use, I'm also going to assume that price might be a factor, because you're not necessarily going to be touring this thing. You're not necessarily going to be earning money with this thing. So, yeah, price. Two, I think I'm going to try and think about what's included in the device, so kind of value for that. So, you know, is it plentiful, or does it have a lack of some stuff or whatever? I had some other thoughts. They're all gone now. Boss stuff tends to be on the cheaper side, and you do get quite a lot for the money. Oh, updates, that was the other thing, because I feel like a device which is well updated continues to feel like a purchase that you appreciate and get more and more out of. Boss falls down in that regard because over the lifetime of their GT1000, GT1000 core, they don't seem to update the devices, which I think is a bit of a misstep, because it's something that has worked so well for Line 6 and Fractal to keep that momentum going and keep those people that have bought your device interested, and keep people that are making videos about your devices as well talking about them, because there's something relevant to talk about. There isn't really that sort of stuff going on with the Boss stuff. So I can understand why you might think the Fender Tone Master Pro might be an upgrade, because in some ways it's the most latest thing. It is being talked about, is relevant. But in terms of overall tone and effects in there at the moment, I wouldn't necessarily say that it, to me, sounds much better than the GX100. The touchscreen for sure is more pleasant, and the UI is more pleasant. And I think, if anything, a touchscreen does make most sense at home. But yeah, I wouldn't necessarily, my first choice would not be to go for the Tone Master Pro, since you asked me. My first thought is, do you actually need a modeler at all in this situation? And I might be seriously considering maybe a couple of plugins instead, because frankly, these things are just running software, right, and running code, and particularly Helix, you can run all of that in Helix native within a DAW, or say with Neural DSP, you could get a couple of their plugins, or you could even just trial through all of their plugins, and since there's probably like 16, 17 of them, and you get a 14-day trial on each, you could probably go for quite a while just doing that and see if that works for you. So you wouldn't even necessarily need to make a purchase to try that. I think the interface for me of a plugin is oftentimes more inspiring. Not only that, the presets on the plugins generally tend to, I think, sound a bit better than the presets that you get on these types of devices. For whatever reason, I guess they use artists to create presets for the Neural DSP plugins. So that would be something I'd consider maybe. Since you've got a Marshall Origin 20 and a Les Paul, I'm going to consider that you may be going more down the classic-y rock or the rock route anyway. And Scuffum S-Gear, it might be a good option there too. Home use, I think, puts Ampero 2 Stomp in the discussion, because the only issues that I really had with this is that for switching stuff, you get these occasional dropouts, not occasional, but dropouts in sound if you do a long press or that sort of stuff. And it doesn't have scene capability or snapshot capability, which are things that I would probably need to really make use of this live. But it's got your touchscreen, it's got software, the editor, which would be useful for home as well, except it drops out a little bit, so that's another slight issue. But the tones in here are really good, I think, and have impressed me more than the Fender Tone Master Pro ever did. Each time I turn on the HoTone Ampero Stomp, I'm impressed by it. So that would be something I consider. They just brought out the Ampero Stage and the Ampero Mini. I got contacted about demoing the Ampero Mini, but at the moment I can't see that there's enough reason for me to bother demoing the Ampero Mini, given that it's just a smaller version of the Ampero. So I'd like to see Ampero kind of, or HoTone, Hot One, whatever they're called, develop a few more and bring more updates. But as it is, it's got loads and loads of amps, so pretty good value for money in that regard, and does all the things. And there are updates coming more regularly than, say, someone like Boss. Not quite as regular as maybe Line 6 or Fractal, but there are updates happening. I think the Quad Cortex definitely deserves a mention. And again, if you're thinking about the Tone Master Pro, then most of what's good about the Tone Master Pro is also in the Quad Cortex, except the Quad Cortex has more power. Not more power, but realistically you can use more of that power. The seamless switching thing from the Tone Master Pro, I'm not going to assume is that useful for home users. It's more of like a live thing. But you also have the capture technology in the Quad Cortex, as well as it looking like a really neat unit. And that was another thing actually with the plugins and stuff, is that you don't have to have cables and modelers on the floor. Oh, that's another thing we should probably talk about, I guess, the power supplies. Each of the HoTone Ampero Stomp to the HX Stomp, the Quad Cortex, the GX100, they all have pretty crappy power supplies that kind of look a little bit gross, so that's something you might want to factor in if it's sitting at home and, you know, if that makes you feel any kind of way. If you wanted the most kind of overkill, but also the thing that might make you look at other modelers the least, the Fractal FM3, I think Turbo would be the way to go, unless you want dual amping, in which case you want to go for the FM9. Incidentally, the HoTone Ampero, the GX100 and the HX Stomp can do dual amping, and the Quad Cortex. The FM3 is different in that it cannot, if that's a thing that you're looking for, but this is going to give you probably the most value for money because it's got the most stuff in it. Also, if you're thinking about using it at home, the desktop editor really does make up for what a lot of people find a fairly tricky editor to use. Not only that, there's a good community at Fractal that know what they're talking about and will help you out, and there's people like Leon Todd, Marco Fanton, and so on, making videos online about all of that sort of stuff. The Yex amp guide adds real value to this unit. And also, if you're thinking about Marshall tones, nothing does Marshall tones as good as a Fractal unit. It's got the most variety of Fender amps, the most variety of Marshall amps, the most variety of Mesa amps, the most variety of Dumble amps. So if you're really looking for the solution for, I don't know, the most serious overkill, can do pretty much everything, but isn't crazy expensive, the Fractal FM3 I think is a way to go. The FM9 I'd suggest is probably more suited toward actual gigging use. That would probably be fair to say. And the Axe-Fx 3 as well is would be, I'd guess, total overkill, although a very cool thing. But yeah, I think Fractal for me would be like the top of the list in terms of, right, this is as much as you could spend on a unit and get all of this stuff. Best reverbs, best delays, best amps. Not necessarily the most user-friendly unit, but you can get around that, and you've got that desktop editor. I think that one, for me, I would definitely recommend over the Tone Master Pro, except for talking about, you know, things that kind of look shiny and things that maybe are satisfyingly, you know, touchscreeny. If you're looking for a touchscreen, then obviously that doesn't do that, and it doesn't do the capturing stuff of the Quad Cortex. But for everything else, I feel like Fractal is a good bet. Oh, and doesn't have a horrible power supply because it's built in, so that could kind of look a bit tidy. You've got a kettle lead for that, and I think that's decent. Gets updates really regularly, and yeah, value for money in terms of having probably like double what most other units have in them. So there's that. And then the answer for me that I use all the time at home is the HX Stomp, which I think kind of hits a sweet spot for most things. So it gets updates regularly, sort of like once or twice a year, where they kind of bring in new amp models, new delays, new reverbs. Of late, the reverbs have been brought in by a guy called Norm, who used to work for Digitech, Lexicon. So the dynamic plates, your dynamic halls. I think it's pretty good value for money. I think $499 is what it is in the UK at the moment. But yeah, you get a good range of amplifiers. If you're totally into the Marshall thing, I'm not sure that maybe the Helix Marshalls at the moment are not necessarily top tier in terms of Fractal at the moment. I think stands at the top of the table for the Marshall stuff. But yeah, a really full palette of effects, drives, delays, reverbs, creative type effects, you know, like shuffling loopers and glitch delays. Since you asked me and you're watching my channel, this is what you're hearing me use most of the time. These days, it wouldn't take me very long to put together presets that I think sound as good as anything else. But not only that, it doesn't cost a bomb. And yeah, I really appreciate the Line 6 HX Stomp, particularly now that the HX1 is out, for being incredible value, offering so much, purely because this is what I use all the time. I have a bunch of them. I've got one on a board, I've got one down there, I've got this one that sits up there. For me, I think this is a sweet spot of gets updates, priced well, and has loads of stuff in it. So yeah, that's the answer for me. But again, is that an upgrade from a Boss GX100? In some ways, yes. In others, not really. So you could be totally fine with where you're at. If you want things that are based on real-world amplifiers and that sort of thing, then the Line 6 is that. The GX100 approach is a little bit different, but still good. You had a question around your iLoud monitors. Now, if you look on YouTube, there are some comparisons. What I use are JBL LSR 305s, and there's a couple of comparisons with those iLoud monitors. I think people generally have pretty favourable opinions on those iLoud monitors. You could look at some comparisons yourself, but that for me, I think, is my answer. Like, if you want to go for the overkill home thing, which basically stops you looking at other pieces of gear so much, like Fractal really is great sounding stuff and has all of this stuff in it. And I think on the other side, for a bit more of a cost-effective solution, the HX Stomp I use every day. I gig one, and I'd be totally happy with just one of these. But also what you've got is pretty fine. It's just lacking, I think, a little bit in the community and lacking in regular updates. That's, yeah, my opinion on that. Quad Cortex I would recommend probably over the Tone Master Pro for me personally, because they're quite similar in quite a lot of ways, except the Tone Master Pro won't let you do as much as the Quad Cortex will. And the Quad Cortex has the capture technology, which I think probably makes it a winner, as well as being a really nice smaller form factor, although power supply is not so good. Those are kind of my thoughts on that. The other thing that I would say is that instead of the modeler, I think a plugin probably for a lot of people could be a cleaner, cheaper way to go. And you might even find that, you know, basically when I'm using a modeler these days, oftentimes I have like 2-3 presets that I'm using 95% of the time, right? And I could equally do that in a plugin. You know, Helix Native, I could use all the time in that way. Or, like I said, some of the neural DSP stuff or stuff from S-Gear. And the other kind of thoughts I had were around, if you've got pedals that you gravitate towards, then something like a Universal Audio Dream 65 could be a good bet. Those sound really good. Where you're not having to worry about the whole kind of complicated side of modeling where you're building presets and that sort of stuff. I don't know if that was any help at all, Joe, but hopefully that answers your question, and hopefully it might be somewhat useful to someone else. I was using the HX Stomp in the intro there. The preset's called Super Dumb Vox. Kind of sounds nice and glassy and voxy. You can grab that in the Gumroad folder if you wanted to. Cheers for stopping by. Let other folks know your preferences in the comments if you'd like to. If you're an advocate for the Fender Tone Master Pro, please let people know. I've had people comment saying, you know, that they've had a good time with bits and pieces of them. Personally, I didn't think it was necessarily game-changing or anything like that. But, you know, if you're looking for maybe the best-looking user interface right now, I think Fender Tone Master Pro probably takes that, right? Cheers.